7. After a calming cup of tea, Hilda set off with Ulfr on her quest to reach the caves of Kismet. They passed the bloodbog tree and the catfish pond, then struck out across the wilderness towards the river. "What have you heard about the caves of Kismet?" asked Hilda. "Put it this way," said Ulfr. "They are extremely difficult to reach. I didn't know the Prime Minister had his headquarters there, but I'm not surprised. They say it's the most secure location in all the northern elven counties." They crossed the river at the stepping stones and headed southeast along the edge of the blue pine forest. Twig wandered off among the trees. "When I was little," said Ulfr, "my grandmother used to recite a rhyme about the caves of Kismet. By the way, I know I'm still little, so don't even bother saying it." "Do you remember the rhyme?" Ulfr lowered his voice to a doom-laden whisper and began to chant. "You want to get to the caves of Kismet? You'll have to face 3 terrible tests. The test of courage, the test of skill, and the test of exceptional brainyness. What happens if you fail a test? Prepare yourself for certain death." "Your grandmother sounds like a bundle of laughs," muttered Hilda. "She was a wonderful woman," said Ulfr. "Turn left here." A narrow path led up a steep slope through the trees. It was overgrown with blue pine branches, and Hilda had to use both arms to push the branches aside. She kept walking into spiderwebs which clung to her face and made her wince in disgust. Hilda had never been to the great waterfall before, and she was beginning to feel nervous. "Ulfr," she whispered, "those tests you mentioned, are you sure there isn't a test of rock sketching, or crumpet toasting, or dragon panic strategy?" "Granny didn't mention any of those," said Ulfr. "But you never know," he added kindly. As they emerged from the forest onto a wind-blown hillside, something small and furry flew through the air and slammed into Hilda, knocking her off her feet. She sat up and looked around to see what had hit her. Beside her on the ground lay a nut-brown rabbit with big, dazed eyes. "Aw, look," she said. "It's a cute little bunny rabbit." "It's not just a rabbit," said Ulfr. "Hello, Bunny," said Hilda. "Are you all right?" "It's not just a rabbit," said Ulfr. "You took a real tumble, didn't you, Bunny? Let me help you up." "It's not just a rabbit," said Ulfr. "Well, what would you call it?" asked Hilda. "I'd call it a beast of the Light Brigade," said Ulfr. "May I suggest you turn your head to the left?" Hilda looked up the hill and let out a startled yelp. Charging towards her down the hill was a cavalry of rabbits, galloping and snarling, kicking up clods of earth and moss as they thundered onwards. Some of the rabbits were being ridden by elves in full battle armor. "The Light Brigade is the Prime Minister's private cavalry," said Ulfr. "They ride wild beasts into combat." "Tally-ho!" cried the commander elf at the front of the brigade. "Implement giant girl attack maneuvers." Hilda noticed that many of the mounted elves were whirling slingshots around their heads. "Fire at will," bellowed the cavalry commander. A tiny pebble whizzed past Hilda's head, then another and another. "Now might be a good time to run away," suggested Ulfr. Hilda gritted her teeth. "I'm not running away," she said. "I'm going to the caves of Kismet. I'm going to save my home, if it's the last thing I do." "It will be," muttered Ulfr. Hilda dropped to a crouch and raised an arm to protect her face. Pebbles to right of her, pebbles to the left of her, pebbles behind her volleyed and clattered. The first rank of rabbits was almost upon her. Hilda dropped to the ground and rolled to avoid the thundering paws, but the rest of the cavalry charged right into her, knocking the breath clean out of her. The next thing she knew, she was surrounded on all sides, being butted and rammed by buck-toothed bunnies. There were hundreds of them. "Get off me!" panted Hilda. "Get off! Get off!" Out of a nearby bush leaped a blur of white fur, and landed in the middle of the fray, growling and snarling savagely. "Twig!" cried Hilda. 600 bunnies were no match for one wild Dear Fox. They scattered in terror, bucking their riders off their backs in their hurry to get away from those snapping teeth and jabbing antlers. Retreat! Cried the elk commander as he landed on the grass on his bottom. Implement giant girl retreat maneuvers. The rabbits galloped off down the hill. Dismayed elf riders fled after them. The light brigade disappeared into the trees as suddenly as it had arrived. Thank you, Twig, cried Hilda. You're the bravest, most loyal friend an adventurer could ever hope for. You were pretty brave yourself, whispered Elfer. In fact, I think you just passed the test of courage. 8. Hilda, Elfer, and Twig journeyed on up the winding path that led to the caves of Kismet. The path came to an end on a rocky plateau, beside a waterfall. Thousands of gallons of water plunged past them into the fjord below. Where now? Asked Hilda. The path continues right there in front of you, said Elfer. Look, it leads along the rock face and behind the waterfall. Hilda looked and saw a narrow ledge no more than a few centimeters wide. That's not a path, she said. It's an elf path, said Elfer. I could walk along it easily. That's because your shoes are 100 times smaller than mine, said Hilda. Seriously, Elfer, how am I supposed to walk along that ledge? There's no shame in failure, said Elfer. If we turn back now, we'll be home in time for lunch. I'm not turning back, said Hilda. I'm going to see the elf prime minister. Okay, said Elfer. In that case, could you set me down? I'd rather not be in your ear when you fall off that ledge and plummet 1,000 elf meters onto the rocks below. Fine. Hilda cupped her hand to her ear and lowered the elf to the ground. I'll go first, and you walk behind me, Elfer. Twig, you stay here and keep watch. Hilda put down her adventuring satchel and removed her boots and socks. She took a deep breath and stepped off the plateau onto the narrow ledge. The rock felt cold and slippery beneath her feet, worn smooth by many centuries of falling water. She stood on the tips of her toes, pressed her body against the cool rock face, and began to edge sideways, trying not to look down. Twig followed behind her, lifting his nimble hooves one by one and placing them carefully on the narrow, slippery ledge. All the time Hilda had known Twig, he had never obeyed a stay command. He was her friend, after all, not her pet. Elfer brought up the rear, shaking his head. You're going to slip, he shouted. I'm not, said Hilda. You are, shouted Elfer. I'm not, said Hilda, through gritted teeth. I'm not going to slip. I'm not going to slide, and I'm not going to fall, so there. So saying, she tossed her head confidently and fell off the ledge. Ulfer shouted. Twig barked. Hilda's fingernails scrabbled helplessly at the smooth rock. As she slithered down the sheer rock face, she flung a desperate arm towards the plateau and managed to grab a tuft of scurvy grass. The scurvy grass roots groaned and tore as they took Hilda's weight. With her legs flailing in thin air, she reached up, grabbed the edge of the plateau with her fingertips, and hauled herself back up onto solid rock, trembling all over. Twig and Ulfer edged back along the ledge and ran to Hilda's side. Twig nudged her lovingly with his antlers. Ulfer scowled at her, as if to say, I told you so. Hilda sat on the plateau and stared at the mass of falling water plummeting past her. It's impossible, she gasped. That ledge is as slippery as glass. You're in shock, said Ulfer. You should eat something. Hilda reached into her adventuring satchel and felt around for a cucumber sandwich. Her fingers touched something dry and sticky. Ew, she exclaimed. What's that? It was her sketchbook. She had not had time to clean it since yesterday's adventure, and the troll drool had dried into a sticky mess all over the cover of the book. Hilda had an idea. She took out the book and started smearing the gluey saliva all over her hands, knees, and toes. What is that stuff? Said Ulfer. You don't want to know, replied Hilda. When she had finished, she stood up, took a deep breath, and stepped once more onto the slippery elf ledge. Pressing her knees, chest, and forehead against the rock, she shuffled along it on the tips of her toes. "You're doing great," shouted Ulfr, springing up and settling himself back in her ear. With the gummy troll spit on her hands and feet, Hilda did not slip as she squeezed between the rock face and the curtain of falling water behind her. "Not far now," said Ulfr. Hilda felt sick with fear, and her tiptoes ached from carrying her weight. But the path was getting wider, and soon she was able to place her feet side by side and walk along more comfortably. At last, she found herself on a wide shelf of rock behind the waterfall. Right in front of her were two dark cave openings. Twig joined her on the rocky shelf. "The cave's a kismet," cried Ulfr in her ear. "You've done it. You've passed the test of skill." "Indeed she has," cried another voice, "but now she must face the test of exceptional braininess, and judging by the look of her, I don't think she stands a chance." "Hey," said Hilda, "I'm right here, you know." She looked down and saw an elf dressed as a jester. He wore long, curly shoes and a tricorn hat with jingly bells. "Two caves," said the elf, "one to your left, one to your right. The elf prime minister in one, a man-eating troll in the other. You make your choice, you meet your destiny." Hilda stared down at the jester elf, then up at the dark cave entrances. "I don't believe there's a troll in either of these caves," said Hilda. "What would it find to eat in there?" "Sometimes a wolf strays into its cave," said the jester, "but mostly it eats travelers who make the wrong choice. And why doesn't it eat you?" The jester grinned and pointed at the bells in his hat. "Okay," said Hilda, "I believe you now." "Two water spirits guard the entrances," continued the jester. "One guards the left cave, one guards the right. To help you make your choice, you may ask one spirit one question." "Easy," said Hilda. "I'll just ask which cave the PM is in." "Not so fast," said the jester. "There is something else you should know. One spirit always tells the truth, the other always lies." The falling water behind Hilda bulged and bubbled on either side of her, and two pairs of watery eyes appeared. Twig growled and backed away. "The spirits look exactly the same," said Hilda. "How do I know which one is the liar?" "You don't," cackled the jester. "How I love this job. Now, enough of the talking. Ask your question and make your choice." "9. Twig growled. Ulfr sighed. Hilda scratched her head. "I know," she said at last. "I'll ask one of the spirits what color my hair is. If it answers blue, I'll know it's the truth teller. If it answers anything else, I know it's the liar." "So what?" said Ulfr. "You still won't know what cave the Prime Minister is in, and you'll have used up your only question." Hilda groaned in frustration. "Ow, my brain is hurting. Can't you just tell me, Ulfr?" "No," said Ulfr. "I have never been exceptionally brainy." "I thought you were a writer." "Exactly," said Ulfr. "What about you, Twig?" But Twig was no help either. He looked from the caves to the spirits, to cave spirits, to caves to spirits so fast he ended up getting dizzy and falling over sideways. Hilda groaned again. The brainiest person she knew was probably her mum. Even the woodman was pretty brainy. What would he say? She wondered. Wait, that's it. Hilda turned to face the water spirit on her left. "Here's my question," she said. "If I asked the other spirit whether the Prime Minister is in this cave, what would it say?" There followed a moment of silence, and then a watery voice came from the spirit. "It would say no." "Aha," said Hilda. "There are two possibilities here. first possibility, you are the liar, in which case you're lying when you say the other spirit would say no. So it wouldn't say no, it would say yes, the Prime Minister is in this cave. And if you're the liar, then it's the truth teller, and I can totally trust it's yes. Second possibility, you are the truth teller, in which case you are telling the truth about the other spirit saying no. But if you're the truth teller, it's the liar. So it's no is itself a lie. Either way, the truth is the same. The Prime Minister is in this cave. If you go, then, said the jester. Hilda ventured forward into the darkness, followed by Elf and Twig. Excuse me, said Alfred, clambering up into her ear again. I didn't understand a word you just said. Would you mind telling me how sure you are that you've made the right choice? On a scale of, say, 1 to 10? 7, said Hilda. That's what I was afraid of, muttered Alfred. As Hilda moved forward, she bumped into a thick wooden door which creaked open to reveal a beautiful cavern flooded with light. A dozen suited elves sat at a small rock table in the middle of the cavern. "Arg!" cried the elves. "It's the giant girl." Twig heard the elves, but could not see them. He dashed excitedly around the cavern, and the suited elves dashed to and fro to avoid him. "Twig, calm down," shouted Hilda. "I come in peace," she added quietly. "Which one of you is the Prime Minister?" An elf with a pointy chin climbed up onto the table. "I am the Prime Minister," he said. "What do you want, giant girl?" "I want to stay in my house," said Hilda. "Impossible," said the Prime Minister. "Why?" cried Hilda. "What harm have I ever done to you?" The Prime Minister spread his arms wide. "You keep stepping on us." "That doesn't hurt you," said Hilda. "Last night I saw Twig's leg go right through a house without causing any damage." "Yes, but look at it from our point of view. Imagine how traumatic it is having a giant foot come through the ceiling, and imagine how hard it is to get babies to sleep when two giants are nattering nearby." Hilda looked at it from their point of view. For the first time, she stopped thinking about her own problems, and she started imagining what it must be like to live in the shadow of giants, having to cope with deafening noise and bright lights and enormous feet clomping to and fro. The more she imagined it, the less angry she felt. In fact, she began to feel a little bit sorry. "Forgive us," she said in a small voice. "We had no idea we were upsetting anyone. But now you've told us, we can try to change. We'll turn our lights off earlier and keep our voices down. And I'll get Mom to sign the forms. If she can see you, she won't step on you anymore." The Prime Minister shook his head. "It's not as simple as that. For as long as anyone can remember, the occupants of your house have been considered enemies of the king. We've been at war with you for generations. It's just that no one has ever bothered to do anything about it, until me. I'm afraid that fixing the situation at this point is, out of your hands," said Hilda. "That's right." The Prime Minister held up his stubby arms. "And I don't even have hands." Hilda stared at him. "You're saying that the only way I can save my home is to sign a peace treaty with the Elf King?" "Exactly." The Prime Minister beamed. "And where can I find the king?" "I can't tell you." "What?" "I've signed a secrecy form promising not to tell any non-elf the location of the king's castle." "It's one of those forms that every elf signs as soon as they are old enough to write their names. Sorry about that." "10. That evening Hilda ate her stew and rowan berries with a heavy heart. She did not ask for a second helping. She did not ask Mom to play Dragon Panic or to toast marshmallows in front of the fire. She did not even want to flop on the sofa and read Caves and Their Unfriendly Occupants. All she wanted to do was go to bed. She had a bath, put on her pajamas, and got into bed. Twig lay down on her feet, and Mom came into her bedroom to tuck her in and say goodnight. "Traumatic day?" asked Mom. Yes, said Hilda in a small voice. I tried to fix our problem with the elves, but it's impossible. Mom came and sat on the edge of the bed. It's strange hearing you say that word. Hilda scratched her head. Elves? No, impossible. You hardly ever say something's impossible. Get used to it. Hilda scratched her head again. You're scratching a lot, said Mom. Come here and let me check your head. Hilda leaned forward to let Mom explore her hair. Mom picked up a comb and sketchbook and started combing Hilda's hair over a blank page. Tiny orange specks fell out onto the paper. Have I got nits? Hilda asked. No, said Mom. Mittens. Hilda grabbed her magnifying glass and examined one of the specks. It looked like a minuscule version of Angelina, the elf mayor's cat. She remembered how Angelina had looked much thinner after hiding in her hair. Mom continued to comb Hilda's hair in silence, and then she spoke again, a little too brightly. I've been thinking, Hilda, we haven't been to Trollberg for ages. Let's go there tomorrow, just for a day. Mom, please, just for the day, repeated Mom with a big fake smile. Just to have a look around. Mom poured the mittens into a tiny box on Hilda's bedside table. She kissed Hilda on the forehead, tucked her in, and left the room. As soon as Mom was gone, Alfred jumped off the pile of books on Hilda's bedside table and peered into the mittens box. I should probably take these to Angelina, he said. Yes, you should, said Hilda. And don't bother coming back unless you're going to tell me where the king's castle is. Alfred shook his head. You know I can't do that, he said. I signed the secrecy form, just like everyone else. I'm not allowed to breathe a word to any non-elf about the location of the king's castle. Forms, 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 Hilda said. That's all you elves care about, isn't it? Yes, said Alfred. No, you can't pretend forms aren't important. What about friendships? Hilda cried. Does that count for anything in your ridiculous paper-filled little world? She switched off her bedside lamp and pulled her blankets violently up over her head, causing Twig to wake with a start and jump down off the bed. Hilda tried to sleep. She closed her eyes and imagined water spirits gliding under a bridge. That usually made her doze off, but not tonight. She could not stop thinking about her failure with the elves and about Mom planning to visit Trollberg tomorrow. Just to have a look around. Ha! To look at houses, more like. To sign Hilda up for a local school. Hilda's eyes filled with tears. The grandfather clock down the hall chimed 12. And then there was another sound, a gentle tapping on the window. Hilda pushed back the covers and flicked on the light. Twig was standing on the windowsill, pawing at the glass. What is it, boy? What can you see? Hilda went to the window and gazed out. The moon was high in the sky, shining down on 1,000 miniature houses. To the north loomed Bobblehat Mountain, its lofty peak covered in snow. To the east, the river wound its way towards Trollberg. Twig scrabbled at the window. His neck fur stood on end, and his small black eyes were staring. Up at the sky above Bobblehat Mountain, where a colossal head and shoulders blotted out the stars. Hilda pressed her nose to the window. It's the giant, she whispered. The giant that comes at midnight. The midnight giant turned its head slowly from side to side as if looking for something. Then it glanced down at Hilda's house and froze. Hilda gazed up at the giant. The giant gazed down at Hilda. This time, Hilda did not call her Mum. She just stood there with her hands flat against the window pane. A great calm descended on her, and the beating of her heart quieted to a peaceful thud. Her tears dried slowly on her cheeks. The giant's eyes shimmered in the moonlight. It heaved a sigh, turned away slowly, and lumbered off into the darkness. Don't go, said Hilda. She undid the latch and threw her window wide open. Please stay, she shouted, but the giant had already disappeared.